Welcome to Dialing In Your Coffee Business, where we help cafe and roastery owners build a healthy coffee business that takes great care of people, including them. I'm Michael Ryan. I'm a certified business coach and consultant that helps cafe and roastery owners build a healthy coffee business that takes great care of people, including them. On today's episode, I'm joined by Maxwell Mooney, and we dive into our discussion on a new and hopefully more useful mental model for how a healthy business does in fact take great care of all of the people, the owners, the staff, and everybody in between. The analogy that we're going to deliver is a mental model. It's a foundational framework for how a healthy business works. If you install this foundational framework in your business, you will find that 1,001 business decisions preemptively make themselves clear. You're almost preemptively deciding these things, making these decisions before you're even faced with them, because you have a hopefully more accurate and more useful mental model or foundational framework for how a healthy business works. Before we begin, I'd like to mention that this podcast is an extension of our coaching and consulting. It's a part of our effort to make all of the tools necessary to build a healthy coffee business zero cost to everyone. In keeping with that theme, I'd like to thank one of today's sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by our How to Grow a Cafe online course. If your coffee shop is already open, then you've learned that turning a profit, taking a paycheck, and taking a day off is a lot trickier than you might have expected. Or maybe you were told that none of those things would ever happen, so don't even try. Either way, this course is for you. No matter where you're at in the process, this course will remind you that it's possible to turn a profit, to take a paycheck, and to even take a day off. And more than that, this course will show you how. Owners often ask me if they're still going to get something out of this course because they've already been open for 5, 10, 15 plus years. And my answer is always the same. Experience does not equal expertise. Just because you've been open for a long time does not mean you've built the healthiest coffee business you could be building, because experience is not the same as expertise. Everyone who has taken this course has learned at least one thing that has either saved them or made them thousands and thousands of dollars. You can access this course and all of our others at threadbarecoffeeconsulting.com/courses. And as a listener of the podcast, you get a discount on all of our on-demand courses. Just enter the code podcast100, all caps, and you'll get $100 off any of our online on-demand courses. That's threadbarecoffeeconsulting.com/courses, and enter the code podcast100, all caps, to get $100 off any of our on-demand courses. All right, welcome back. I'm super excited to chat today with you all and with Maxwell about one of the most helpful analogies or mental models for how to run a healthy business, how to build a healthy business, and that's what we're talking about today. Over the course of my life, my story, again, I mentioned in the last episode, not being particularly entrepreneurially minded, I didn't understand how a healthy business works. And I find that a lot of people don't actually understand how a healthy business works. And when we come to the table with different assumptions, different mental models, a lot of conversations, a lot of arguments, a lot of disagreements are actually just based on a misunderstanding or a different understanding of how a healthy business should work. And one of the first things I cover with my one-on-one clients especially is this concept of a business, a healthy business, is a lot like an airplane. Mm-hmm. And I think, as far as I can tell in my research, this idea was first published in 2013 in a Quora article that I think later got picked up by Forbes. And now there's a company called Business Made Simple that is taking that idea and running with it. And a couple of years ago, I did their business coaching certification, and I really enjoyed it. But it really helped me understand what a healthy business is supposed to be doing and how to construct a healthy business so that it takes great care of people. In my work, coaching and consulting, I have not found a better analogy. And when we come to the table, we all have, these underlying assumptions of how a healthy business works. And it doesn't even matter who's right and who's wrong, let's say. If a team just has different assumptions or different mental models, it's game over. And everything will just kind of devolve into disagreements and arguments. But if we can rally around a common idea that's both true and useful, and I think this analogy is both, it's really, really powerful. And so if you're not familiar with the analogy, it's super simple, because every airplane, regardless of its size and function has basically 6 main parts. There's a cockpit, which is like the leadership, mission, vision, values for the business. There is the wings, which are like the products and the services you offer. There's the right engine. On a commercial airplane, there's usually 2 engines. The right engine is the marketing efforts. The left engine would be your sales efforts. The body of the airplane is where the people sit, of course, and then the fuel tanks are the cash flow. So cockpit, leadership. Sorry, go ahead.
I have a quick question. What part of a business is the like really cramped seats where your knees like smash into the back of the seat? Because that's what I want to know. Because I need to figure out how to avoid that.
Yeah. Well, as you so astutely pointed out on one of our small group coaching calls, the analogy does break down at a certain point. So I don't actually have an answer to like which part of the business is the cramped seats.
I just know I need to stay out of that role in particular. Maybe it's a consultant, because if it's a consultant, then I'm hosed. Because I don't fit in those seats as it is.
I kind of wonder if it's maybe more helpful to say it's an airplane as it should be, which would be seats with legroom enough for all.
What a glorious vision of the future.
Yeah, a glorious vision, or a vision of the past, more like it. Well, so a healthy coffee business that takes great care of people would be like an airplane that has seats that have legroom for most everybody. Is how I like to think of it. And one of the things that analogy immediately makes clear is that there are certain things that are true for business. For example, do the wings need to provide lift to the airplane? Yes, that is their literal function. And if the wings are your products and services, wings need to add lift, and they need to be light enough so that they don't just weigh down the whole plane. Products that are not profitable are like wings that don't add any lift. You might love them, but they are death to the airplane. Same thing with marketing and sales. Like marketing especially, that's the engine. A lot of times a plane will have one engine, and if so, it'll just be the marketing engine. Does that engine need to provide thrust? Yeah, that's its job. And an engine that doesn't provide thrust is not just decoration, it's dead weight. And
so
I like this.
Engines put more air across the wings, right? Like ultimately, which gives you more lift.
Yeah, in propeller airplanes, yes. In jet propulsion, not as much. It drives via thrust. It pushes the wing through airspace faster, and that creates more lift. Yeah, propellers are a little bit different than jet engines. The basic principles, though, hold true. And I'd love for the duration of this particular episode to just chat briefly about each of the 6 parts, and especially, Maxwell, some of your thoughts and your experiences with things like leadership and marketing and product profitability and that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. You said something a while ago that really resonated with me, because I'd sent you a tentative curriculum, and it was missing one thing in particular, and it was mission and vision and values. And when you pointed it out, I was like, oh, I'm a hypocrite. But if the cockpit of the airplane is like the leadership, and the mission and vision values is like, where is this airplane going? Mm-hmm. Why does this airplane even exist? Yep. You are, coming from running narrative and running it successfully for so many years, I feel like your perspective on why mission and vision values is so critical is really helpful, because I've been towards being more of a philosopher. So of course I'm going to love crap like that. Yeah. But you're coming from actually running this cafe and still finding that mission, vision, values is essential. Yeah. Why is that? Why is it not just philosophical? Why is it so critical from a tactical, practical, like day in, day out perspective?
Well, there's a number of reasons, but the particular one is that if you don't know exactly what you're doing and why you're doing it, mm-hmm. it doesn't. It's really not helpful, from a standpoint of just like you're going to be constantly barraged with a million options, questions, ideas, concepts, opportunities, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And if you don't have a mechanism by which to filter them out, you're going to go crazy. First of all, but secondly, I think the biggest thing is that like people want things that are purposeful in their lives, and whenever you have a vision for the future that is better than the one that's currently there, and you've one thing that people are going to get sick and tired of me saying and hearing me say is that every business has to solve a problem.
Yes.
is that that's the fundamental thing that makes a business function is solving a problem.
Yeah.
And if you're not doing that, then you're not going to be in business for very, very long.
Yeah.
Your dream, let's say you just open this coffee business because it's been your dream for your whole life, it's going to quickly turn into a nightmare because you're not actually solving anybody's problems. So nobody's going to support your business or buy from you because you're not actually fixing a problem or solving a problem.
Yeah.
And so at its fundamental outset, the function of a business is to solve that problem. So if you don't know what problem you're solving, of course your business is going to flounder. It's like in some ways people can accidentally back into solving a problem that they didn't realize that they had. Like, I can't tell you how many times I'll talk with people who'll be like, well, we opened this up and then but people kept in, like, they come in and order sandwiches a lot. Like, we're actually, like, we sell more sandwiches than coffee. And it's like, well, that's because you were actually solving the sandwich problem, which is the real problem that people had. They didn't have a coffee problem. They had a sandwich problem. And you just happened to, like, accidentally figure that out through just selling a bunch of sandwiches and realize you need to stock more. But it's like, if you had planned that and intentionally done that, then that's a much better thing. But if you are anti-sandwich and you want to be just doing coffee, like, that's a nightmare for you. That sounds horrible.
Yep.
Right? But if you think about solving problems, that's going to get you somewhere.
Yeah.
It's the same way that, like, your staff, like, your customers, like, they want to be on the plane going somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? They want to see where you're going and why you're going there, because they want to go there too. And so you're helping them get there. And if you don't plan your route out and you don't, like, figure out what that problem is, break it down into its constituent parts, and then map out a roadway to get there, it's sort of like someone saying, like, I'm going to fly to Antarctica today. It's like, okay, cool. What kind of plane you have? And they're like, I don't have one. Okay, well, what's your plan to get there? I don't have one. I'm just going to Antarctica.
Yeah.
Okay, sure you are, buddy. So it's, it can quickly become stuff like that.
I'd like to take a brief moment and thank another one of today's sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by our How to Grow a Cafe group coaching cohort. This 12-week cohort is led by Maxwell Mooney, and he meets weekly with the group to follow along with the 12 modules in our How to Grow a Cafe online course. But it is much more than that. When you join our group coaching program, you get access to our private owners-only Slack community, you get access to group call recordings, and you get a link to book one-on-one calls with us during your 12-week cohort. Sometimes you just need an outside perspective and a second set of eyes to figure out what the next best step is for your coffee business. You can watch the full trailer for this program at threadbarecoffeeconsulting.com/group-coaching. And be sure to enter the discount code podcast500 to get $500 off your group coaching cohort. That's threadbarecoffeeconsulting.com/group-coaching to watch the full trailer and enter the code podcast500, all caps, to get $500 off your group coaching cohort. So much of a plane is reverse engineered based on its destination. Like, how much fuel do you need? Well, where do you want to go? What strikes me, and one of the reasons I like this analogy so much, is people get on board a plane because of where it's going.
Yep.
But I work with a lot of coffee business owners, and when I ask them, like, where are you going? What's your mission? They're like, oh, I don't really know. Imagine getting on a plane and being like, hey, where's this plane going? And the captain's like, I don't really know, but you should get on because we're sealing the doors shut here in a minute. Like, heck no, I'm not getting on that plane. What are you talking about? Nobody would get on board a plane if they didn't know where it's going. And when people say, oh, it's just really hard to find and retain good staff, one of the places my brain always goes immediately is like, well, where have you told them you're taking them?
Yeah.
Because if you don't tell them, like the old saying, nature abhors a vacuum, if you don't tell people where you're taking them, you've left a vacuum, and that freaks people out.
Yep. Feels bad.
We have this, neurobiologically, we have this negativity bias towards blank space. And if we leave too much blank space, people will tend to fill it with negative assumptions.
I figured Taylor Swift would write a song about it, but okay.
She's the problem, I hear. But so leaving that blank space, your staff will fill it with something, and it'll probably be inaccurate, but it'll also probably be negative in terms of like, oh, why do we open up another location? Well, probably just to fleece the owner's pockets. Well, no. But did we tell them that it was not that way? Did we tell them that it was something different? Did we tell them that the goal is to open up a cafe location in every suburb around this particular city until there's no more coffee deserts on the outskirts of
Yeah.
Portland or wherever.
Yeah.
No, we never told them that. So when we open up additional locations, they just assume that it's to line the owner's pocket with cash,
Mm-hmm.
and that's almost never the actual desire. I think the other thing I like about the cockpit, thinking of that as the leadership of the airplane, is it helps owners figure out where they need to be. And it's not that they can't do other things, but they need to take care of the things that are related to the cockpit first. And a silly, example would be, how often do you see the pilot and co-pilot rolling the trolley up and down the aisle?
Totally.
Not super often. Why? Are they above that? No. But that's just not their job. And if they do that instead of doing their job, it could crash the whole thing and cost hundreds of lives.
Yeah.
And so they don't, because that's not their job. That's not their main function. Now, early on, when the plane's super small, there is no trolley service, and the owner is like a pilot who's doing all the things. Sure, yeah, but you get to a certain point, and it's pretty early on. I think it's sooner than most owners realize, or sooner than most owners think, where, and again, it's not to say that that's the literal only thing they do, but it is their top priority.
Yeah.
And it's the thing that they do that only they can do.
Mm-hmm.
And by that I mean, if they don't do it, it does not happen. It does not get done. And that's where I think a lot of people need to spend a little bit more time in the cockpit, or at least spend time in the cockpit first before serving coffee and cookies to everybody else.
Yep.
Just to make sure that things are headed in the right direction.
Yeah. To break from the analogy for just a moment, a phrase that I learned from my friend Zaid down at Bar 9 Coffee Collective in Culver City, California, is you can't work on your business if you're working in your business. And I know that other people have said that many times, but that's who I learned it from. But man, that has been such a helpful reminder of those moments when it's like, dude, I have been on the floor working as a barista 5-6 days this week.
Yeah.
And all this other stuff hasn't gotten done yet. It's like, cool. So get yourself off the floor so that way you can get this work done.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
that reminds me of, I heard a quote just recently that if the kind of nuts and bolts of the day-to-day operations, if that starts to take up more than 4 hours of your day each day, you're basically on the path to like burnout and exhaustion. And by that, they're referring specifically to like the things that are happening in your business, like pulling shots, steaming milk, serving customers. As the owner, if that starts to be more than about, depending on how long your work days are, but about more than 4 hours is what this person said, then you're already on that path. So if you're on bar too many hours, serving people too many hours, it's not that it's not because you're above that. Mm-hmm. It's because there's a long list of things that only you can do. And if you're in the back doing dishes, if those things have already been done, go do some dishes, go take out the trash. Mm-hmm. If that's life-giving to you. But if those things haven't been done, don't you dare go back and do dishes and hide back there. You have bigger responsibilities. You have things that only you can do. And by, going back and doing the dishes or whatever, a lot of times that's at the expense of some of these owner-only responsibilities, and that is a dangerous path to go down.
Yep.
What about the right engine? What about marketing? What are your thoughts on marketing? I used to think of marketing as a bad word. Like if you have to do marketing, it must be because your product isn't very good. The only people who have to market have a terrible product.
Yeah, everybody does marketing first and foremost, right? Like just your product itself is marketing.
Love it.
Fundamentally. But I think marketing, the worst examples of marketing to me are the kinds of marketing that is all about like brand and image and doesn't actually communicate the substance of what's being offered. That kind of marketing to me feels really disingenuous.
Yeah.
So to me, marketing is truth telling. It should be always just about sharing what's going on. It's about use, helping communicate what problem you solve. Fundamentally, when you break it down, it's like, hey, I'm offering you this thing, and it's delicious, and you're really going to like it. For example, there are certain brands that I really dislike, even though I know that they work. And as someone, you should still use the things that they do well. So please, as anything I say, please just pick out the meat and spit out the bones. You don't have to take everything that I'm saying or any opinion that I ever have as 100% accurate at all times. It's possible. I assume that you're an adult with rational capabilities who can dissect what I'm saying and take the things that seem to make the most sense good. But anyway, that's beside the point. The reality of this situation for me is Liquid Death, that water company that sells water in the cans with the like tattoo vibe design. I don't know if you've ever seen that. They've become one of the most successful water companies. All of a sudden, the whole idea of branding and marketing water to me, despise it, hate it. Like I hate that. That's the kind of thing that just absolutely drives me nuts because they're not actually that much different. It's like, sure, some mineral waters are a little different because they're mineral composition or something like that. Or the sparkling ones have different levels of, like bubble sizes and those sorts of things. And that's cool. But we took water from a municipal water supply and threw it through an RO system, and now we bottled it and sold it. And we're going to label this under 15 different brands with different images and stuff. That to me, my least favorite kind of thing. However, a specialty coffee business saying hey, we brought in this incredible coffee that was grown, at this really high end of this farm, and it was selected out as a micro lot, and it tastes like 15 different things. To me, that's so exciting. And that is good marketing.
Yeah.
So, I don't think it's a bad thing to tell the truth about what you're doing to more and more people. Yeah. Right? Like at the end of the day, if you exist to solve a problem and your business exists to solve a problem, telling more people about this problem that you solve means that you're helping more people. And that's really what good marketing should be, is helping more people know that you can solve the problem that they have.
Yeah. I love that. I love one of the first things you said was it should be truth telling. It seems like another example of a potential false dichotomy. On the one end of the extreme spectrum would be all branding with no substance. Yeah. Like it's literally just water, but the branding is off the charts. On the other end, I meet a lot of folks who, and almost as an overcorrection to that, totally. They're like, I have an amazing product, but I refuse to tell anyone about it.
Yeah, totally.
And we're doing amazing work, and I talked with one person recently, they more than double their carbon credit offset. And I was like, have you told anybody about this? And they're like, no. So that to me is the other end of the spectrum. Yeah. The beauty is in the middle, but it's a level above, more like the apex of a triangle, where it's like amazing product, amazing work, a thing of substance that you feel you freely tell people about. In Cicero's work, he said, esse quam videre, to be rather than to appear. And I think I almost not to disagree with Cicero, because that's a little bit ostentatious, but wouldn't it be better if it was to both be and appear to be? Like, isn't that even better? This brand seems like they're legit, and they are. Yeah, totally. But that to me is the pinnacle of marketing. It's not that different than a normal human relationship, which I think is actually a super helpful, again, kind of a corollary. When we think about, two people talking, it's weird to say nothing about ourselves in a conversation. It's also weird to talk endlessly about how amazing we are with actually no substance and no basis in truth. Yeah. But I see a lot of people kind of on both ends of the spectrum. When it comes to marketing, I love what you said. Everybody is doing it. Whether you're spending dollars to do it or not is it's not irrelevant, but it's not the differentiator. Yeah. And we have a whole module in our small group coaching on organic marketing. All organic means is you're not spending dollars on marketing things. Yeah. You're still spending time almost always. But that's all organic means. And a lot of people are doing that without realizing it. And wouldn't it be better to do it on purpose since they're already doing it? Flipping to the other side, the other engine of the plane, when we're talking about coffee roasteries, the idea of the other engine being the sales engine makes a little bit more sense. Readily, like in a coffee roastery, there's often a wholesale salesperson. But I've always been curious to ask you, what do you think of when you think of that, this mental model for a cafe? What would the sales engine be in your mind because we don't have a wholesale sales rep, calling people and drumming up business for the roastery or for the cafe. I'd like to take a brief moment and thank another one of today's sponsors. Today's episode is brought to you by our one-on-one coaching program. Whether you're in the startup process or you've already opened up your cafe and roastery, our one-on-one coaching program is for people who are ready for a personalized touch and a proven process to follow. This 12-month program takes you through 3 major phases where we make sure you as the owner are flourishing. We make sure the business is flourishing. And finally, we make sure the staff is flourishing. Not because staff is least important, but because this is the only process that actually works. When you join one-on-one coaching, you get access to all of our group coaching materials, including recordings and the private Slack community. In addition to that, you get a standing one-on-one meeting with us where we walk you through how to ensure that you are flourishing as the owner, how to ensure your business is flourishing, and of course, how to ensure your staff is flourishing. For one-on-one coaching, we prioritize people who have taken our courses and or joined our group coaching, but you can always reach out to us and schedule a strategy call so that we can be helpful and see if one-on-one coaching is a good fit for you. Just go to our website, threadbarecoffeeconsulting.com, and click the link to book a strategy call.
I mean, I think there is, like every time your staff, like your hosts or baristas welcome people in, they're functionally operating as a salesperson, right? Like they're the interface of like, hey, I'm serving you, I'm like welcoming you in, and hopefully if I did a good job, you're going to tell more of your friends about it.
Yeah.
And I think that's fundamentally like I think baristas kind of operate in that way. As a salesperson, obviously at some level, some of the marketing and those sorts of things that an owner can decide to do functions as a way of gaining more sales and getting your name out there in front of more people. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it's like you're really trying to help bring people into the service that you're offering. So baristas in a lot of ways function just the same.
I love it. 100%. I actually think that's a more helpful way to think about what a barista is. I hear a lot of owners, and they think of barista as like to a certain extent, there's truth to this, but like when you think of a barista type role as an entry level job, yes, but also, what if you thought about it like these are kind of my salespeople, my frontline sales staff.
Yeah.
That's a helpful mental model as well to think in terms of like, hey, this is not just an entry-level job. There's potential here for a more elevated type way of thinking about what it means to be a barista.
Yeah, I think entry-level is not, sales is an entry-level job, depending on what kind of sales you're in, it's like entry-level is sort of immaterial. It's more about like, do you help, right? Like a great example is like a concept that a lot of people will be familiar with is suggestive selling, right? Like we sort of bake things in there of like, hey, we're upselling, right? Like, oh, you got this like coffee. Do you want to add like an extra shot to it? Like, what are you thinking? And it's sort of building that in, and that's fundamentally a sales thing. That that's part of doing it. Yeah. But I do think that sometimes people who, again, people can have like a bad idea around sales because they feel like it can be manipulative and they can be like coercive. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, it's not. If it's done rightly, it's about helping solve a problem. So it's like, hey, are you extra sleepy? Do you need an extra coffee? Or like, like a good salesperson is like someone who's like, hey, I heard you say that you had this thing coming up. Did you are you going to want some more coffee after that? Like we have this bottled coffee that would be really helpful for that, right? It's about like matching needs to solutions. Like that's really what sales is. Yeah. So being a good barista is that,
Yeah. 100%. What would you say to somebody who is really convinced that if their product is good enough, they should not have to do any marketing or any selling? Sort of a, if you build it, they will come mentality.
I mean, they might, but you could always get more of them, It's like, do I have ever met anybody who's like, no, I want less business. It's like,
sure,
you can get more of it. It's like, at the end of the day, sure, your product, if you're doing it right and you're doing your service and all those other things, those are still marketing, right? Like if you spend a lot to build this really beautiful cafe so that people take pictures in it and share it with their friends, like you still spent the money on marketing. You just allocated it differently in your budget spreadsheet, But it's like, you could still get more, It's like, you just have to make sure that it's worth it. Yeah. Right? Which is the big thing.
Yeah.
So
I love it.
Yeah, it's like for example, like I'm not saying that you can't do it organically. That's the way that I did a lot of things with narrative.
Mhm.
But there's also absolutely nothing wrong with putting out an ad saying like, "Hey, we're here. If you don't know
Yep.
about us yet, like,
Yeah.
here's what we're doing. We think it's really
Yeah.
cool. That's why we
Mhm.
spent our entire lives figuring out how to do it."
Mhm. Mhm.
And I've been
Yeah.
working at this for hours and hours. So if,
Yeah.
that sounds like something you like, come join us.
I love that. I love that. You know this about me, but I've become increasingly a fan of exploring ads as an option,
Yeah.
and one of the reasons is because I didn't always think this way, but I've realized that there's no blue ribbon for growing a business without spending any ad dollars.
Totally.
Like there's no award for that, and
Nope.
I think people moralize it
Hmm.
often, where it's like,
Yeah.
oh, if I can do it without spending ad dollars, then some like there'll be some award ceremony.
Hmm.
Like there's not. There's no blue
Nope.
ribbon for this. There's
Yeah.
no like first place prize for best job growing a business without spending money on ads.
Hmm.
And especially when you're getting started. But also because the other thing that, this analogy kind of drives this home. Does the plane take off without engines? No. So if you don't do any sales or any marketing, and by that I mean like you actively avoid doing those things, that's a plane that can't get off the ground, and or if it's already in the air, that's a dangerous plane. That's an
Hmm.
unsafe plane. But also it puts the owner in a position of, and the staff as well. I mean, it's for both, but it's a place of empowerment.
Yeah.
If you feel like, hey, choppy air is coming up, I can actually like go to a higher elevation
Hmm.
and minimize that.
Yep.
That feeling of like I can do something, I can implement something, and it will have a positive net effect on both the staff and the business as a whole, and the owner, of course. That feeling of being, we're not going to be fully in control. I don't mean that,
Yeah.
but that internal locus of control, where it's like I'm not 100% in control, but I'm like 51%.
Totally.
51 is still mostly in control.
Yeah.
And it's a big difference between 49% and 51% because it tips the scales in terms of like, how do I feel in general? I feel mostly in control. When we don't do intentional marketing of any kind, what I've noticed is that the effect of that is a feeling of disempowerment, a feeling of external locus of control, a feeling of like, this business is running me, not me running this business. And
Hmm.
that's almost more of why I encourage people to seriously consider not just doing intentional, but even, paying some money wisely,
Yeah.
something that'll get them at least a 5x return on those dollars. But it's almost more because I want them to feel empowered, feel like, hey, when you push the throttle forward on an airplane, if nothing happens when you do that,
Hmm.
that would scare me to death.
Totally.
And a lot of people feel that way about sales and marketing. They're pushing the lever up and down and nothing's happening.
Yeah.
And then they just assume that it's because the lever's broken. Well,
Yeah.
first of all, that's scary. Second of all, wouldn't it be better if it wasn't that way?
Totally.
uh,
Yeah, it reminds
sometimes,
me of this of my
yeah,
first like vehicle that I had. It was a 1992 Ford Ranger with a 4-cylinder in it,
dude, get it.
and that thing was gutless.
Yeah. Oh,
Which
man,
it's like I'm not the
forced.
kind of guy that wants to go racing all the time.
Sure.
I don't need this massive engine with
Right.
incredible
Right.
displacement, or like the latest electric car that can go 0 to 60 in like 3 seconds or less. But when you're driving a gutless vehicle, when you're trying to merge onto the freeway going up a hill slightly, terrifying, terrifying.
Terrifying. Yeah.
It's like because you can't get out of your own way. Like
Yeah.
that's the biggest thing is that you can't get out of your own way.
Yeah.
And I think that some people feel like, well, when they hear like you need a bigger engine, they feel like you're saying that they need to like only care about the engine size or whatever, and it's like
Yeah.
no, you just need to, like it's just not safe if you don't have the
Yeah.
ability to maneuver and navigate where you need to,
I
right? Like
love
when
that.
something
Yeah.
bad happens, you don't have the gas in the tank or whatever to get there.
Yep.
And I think that's really like where we're trying to talk about. It's not like you don't have to go crazy and have the most insane thing, but you
Yeah.
have to have enough.
Yep. I love that. Well, that reminds me of one of my favorite parts about this analogy, and that's thinking of the cash flow of the business as the fuel tanks.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons I like this analogy so much is because I hear a lot of people say, and I think I used to be this way, that paying attention to the money makes it feel like we are somehow just all about the money.
Mm-hmm.
But imagine you're looking at the gas gauge on your plane. Do you look at the gas gauge? Yes. Are you all about the fuel? Is that the only thing you care about? No, that's not why you look at the gas gauge. And so I think we get tripped up a little bit because of whatever connotations we have about money. And goodness, like, that's a huge part of my story as well. But if I like this analogy because it kind of makes it neutral, or a little bit more neutral, in terms of like money. I'm not saying money's the best thing. I'm not saying it's the only thing. I'm also not saying it's evil. It's simply the fuel. And you need enough. Actually, you need a little bit more than enough. To me, it's fascinating that planes take off with more than enough fuel than they technically need. That's why they're safe. Mm-hmm. And so when we say like, hey, you need to be turning a healthy profit. What's a healthy profit? A few more dollars than you technically needed to run the day to day. That's the same thing. Profit is like the fuel reserve, and a safe plane has more than enough fuel. Just like a safe and healthy coffee business has more than enough cash. And to not be turning a profit is to unintentionally be building something that's actually unsafe or not airworthy in our analogy.
Totally. I mean, this reminds me of that one of those phrases that people say with really good intentions, and I don't want to throw their intentions out, but they say things like "people over profit."
Yeah,
which is like the sentiment of the phrase is that you should not sacrifice people for the sake of profit, to which I completely agree.
Yep.
However, what that has sort of created in our cultural context is this idea that profit is bad and that it is always opposed to people, and it creates this false dichotomy that's just not real.
Yep.
At the end of the day, profit is basically, if you're not profiting, you're living paycheck to paycheck. Yep. And not a single person that I know thinks that someone living paycheck to paycheck is a healthy thing. Like, everyone says, it would be best if that didn't happen. Obviously, a lot of people do, and that's not fun, right? And nobody wants that for somebody else. 100%. We all realize that part of thriving means not living paycheck to paycheck. Mm-hmm. So profit just means having more money coming in than you spent. Mm-hmm. That's what profit really is, And so it's like when we encourage people that, hey, profitability, that shouldn't be the only goal, but at the same time you have to take it seriously. Yeah. That's what we mean. As like you have to have enough coming in, so that way when something bad does happen, you've got the reserves to manage it. Yeah. You have to have enough gas in the tank to get where you need to go, and a little bit more.
Yeah. One of the things that strikes me about this conversation is how much of a timeless principle this is. I mean, even Charles Dickens said, I think it was in Great Expectations, if you make 20 pounds a week and you spend 20 and 1 pence, you'll forever be poor. Yep. If you make 20 pounds and you spend 19.99, you'll forever be rich. It's a difference of 2 pence, but the principle of spending less than you make, living within your means, no matter which direction we look at this, there's something that has always been true and always will be true, and it's spend less than you make. That's turning a profit. That's what yields a healthy profit. And when we say profits and we say people over profits, again, what you said, Maxwell, is spot on. It assumes an opposition that doesn't exist. Yeah. And I would say if you ever find yourself in a spot where those two things, people and profits, are actually seeming to butt heads, I would say either they're not butting heads, we just think they are, or we made a mistake a little while back and we created that situation, but they're not inherently in opposition to each other. Yep. And framing them as though they are is neither true nor useful. Yeah. Speaking of people, the body of the airplane is where the people sit. And one of the things I love about this analogy is that it helps us re-anchor around, why does this plane exist in the first place? Mm-hmm. It does not exist to be filled full of fuel and just sit there full of fuel. That'd be so weird. Yeah. It does not exist for you to fill the plane full of Rolexes and just have it sit there full of Rolexes. That would be
maybe if you're
weird.
Rolex, but
maybe if you're Tom Haverford from Parks and Rec.
Entertainment 720.
Like a Rolexus. It's not that. the plane exists to take people somewhere,
Yeah.
or to put it the way Maxwell put it, to solve a problem, to take people from, hey, you're here, to now you're here. Hey, life is here, now it's here. Hey, the problem is here, now it's solved. A plane that does not take people from point A to point B is not, it's not a plane people will get on.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally missing the point of a plane. And I think that that's really helpful. One of the other reasons I like this analogy is because if you've ever been on a plane and the flight attendants are serving the coffee and the cakes or the cookies or whatever, if something pretty intense happens, like let's say some pretty intense turbulence, they'll suspend service until things resume. And I think we miss this a lot. I was on a plane. We were going to Scotland a couple months ago, and they always say versions of this, but on one of the flights, they said, "We are here for your comfort, but primarily we're here for your safety." And I was like, that's it right there. Sometimes we get so terrified of suspending the in-flight service that we actually hurt the people in the long term. Mm-hmm. There are times to say, hey, rough air's coming. Flight attendants, please sit down. Everybody else, you'll get your cookies later. But for now, we need to make sure that we don't hurt anybody physically. Mm-hmm. A silly extension of this analogy would be like a plane in a nosedive. And people are like, but where are my Doritos? Like, okay, I know you were promised your Doritos, but here's the thing. This plane is on fire and about to crash. So we're going to deprioritize your Doritos for a second to make sure this whole thing doesn't go down. Sometimes I feel like there's a lack of helpful and healthy perspective on hey, we're in the middle of almost crashing, and this is not the time to be having certain conversations. Even though long term we want to have those conversations. I know when COVID hit, a lot of people were trying to have conversations about sustainable workplace practices. And I was like, I feel like you don't understand that this whole thing is about to crash, and you want your coffees and cookies. And for just a second, we just are trying to make sure this whole thing doesn't implode on us. Yeah. The last part of the airplane is the wings, and the wings in the analogy are profitable products and services, specifically profitable and in demand. Mm-hmm. So and this I think is a helpful distinction for a lot of folks. A profitable product that nobody wants,
it's not profitable,
is not actually profitable. This is the thing.
Nobody's buying it.
Yeah, nobody's buying it. One of the reasons I'm such a huge fan of not so much profit percentages, but net profit dollars and gross profit dollars is because when you have a high margin product that nobody buys, that's $0. Mm-hmm. And you can have a lower margin percentage wise, but still higher gross profit dollars. And, but this idea that your products have to be profitable and in demand, I get a lot of pushback from people when we say that. I'm not sure. I'm curious what your experience has been with people needing to actually price their products so that there's a healthy gross profit margin.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, like you said, you could have 60% profit margins, but 60% of zero is zero.
Yeah.
You're
talking gross margins right now, yeah?
Yeah, totally. Or net margins, whatever.
Well, yeah, but 60% net margins, that just sounds...
I mean, nobody's doing that in reality. But that's where it comes down to the question of you can say something is for sale all you want, but it's really what someone will buy it at that determines the value of something. Value is never determined by the asking price, but by the purchase price. And so it's just that's one of those things where it's you're being kind of silly. But what I think is helpful to think about, you said in demand. Where does that demand come from? Right, from solving a problem, right? That's the problem that people have, right? And so it's about finding that right careful balance. How do you focus on these things that are actually problems for people, and then create the right amount of healthy margin for you to do it to where it doesn't create more problems for you, right? Because we want a win-win situation here, and really that's what we're trying to do is create a win of I'm going to solve your problem of needing coffee, and I can do that for a little bit better than you could at home, and so you're going to keep coming here, and I'm going to keep making it for you, right?
Yeah.
So it's like that's kind of really where it comes down to, is finding that right balance between the need and your efficiencies and those sorts of things to be able to make that happen. And then sometimes you bump it up and you realize that the demand will start coming down, right? And if you get a little extra, if you have enough margin buffer there, then you can keep selling that product just at a lower margin. But sometimes it's like you have this thing that is in demand, but like when you price it accordingly, the demand disappears, well, then you can't sell it. So when I talk with people about like menu design, it's like sometimes we have that conversation of like, well, maybe you can't sell this product anymore, even if you like it, and even if other people also like it, they're not willing to pay for it what they have to, and so they don't actually. It's not actually solving a problem, right? So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's where my head's at.
I love that. Yeah. I don't know. The first place I came across this idea was Alex Hermosi, but maybe it's somebody else's idea. I'm not sure. But what you said about value versus price, Alex Hermosi has a graph, basically charts like price versus value, and a helpful way to think about this is when the value is higher than the asking price, there's usually a purchase. But what generally happens is that things get less valuable over time, and the price goes up over time. And eventually when those things crisscross, so the asking price is now higher than the perceived value, people will stop buying.
Yep.
A lot of people try to delay that by just never raising their prices. And that can be problematic because that pretty much only, that strategy has only, one conclusion if you hold on to it, and that's you going out of business.
Yep.
Most people that I've worked with, they'll hold on to it until they just absolutely can't anymore. Like they just absolutely cannot do that. And then they'll have to jack the prices significantly just to stay in business.
Yep.
The point of those graphs is to explore ways of making things more and more valuable over time so that you can raise your price incrementally, but people will still continue to patronize you because, yes, you raised your prices by 25 cents, but what they're getting is actually much more than just 25 cents more valuable. Yeah. It's not always possible, but just because it's not 100% possible doesn't mean it's not 80% possible or even 51% possible. I mean, I know you've heard me say this, and folks will hear me say this tons of time. When I say most of the time, I'm really just saying like 51% of the time. That's most. Yeah. I think when people hear folks say like, oh, most of the time you should be able to X, Y, or Z, they're thinking like 99%.
Yeah, totally.
So sometimes I'm just like, hey, 51% of the time you should be able to come up with a creative solution that adds value. So you're not just raising prices for the sake of raising prices.
Totally.
But I think the helpful part of viewing your products and services like the wings is that it makes it clear that they need to be both profitable and in demand. The other thing I like about that analogy is a lot of people, and when I was on Keys to the Shop, Chris kind of hinted at this because we were talking about solutions. He's like, those timeless principles, those are not my solution, but you know what is? More syrups. And I think a lot of times we think like, oh, you know what'll fix this? Adding more products to our product line.
Yep.
But if the products you currently have don't add lift, it's like having wings that don't add lift.
Yeah.
So why would adding more wings to your airplane be helpful? Can you imagine a Frankenstein plane with 6 sets of wings, none of which actually add lift? Yeah. That plane is just going to crash even faster because it's saddled down with additional weight.
Yeah.
None of which is actually helping the plane stay in the air. There was one last question I was excited to ask you for your thoughts on. I've heard people, when it comes to products and services, I've heard people say it's easier to pour gasoline on the fire that's already going than to go over here and start a new project or a new fire, so to speak, from scratch. Meaning, if you have something that's already doing really well, instead of launching a totally new product line to increase sales, just focusing on either marketing the one that's already doing well, pouring gas on the fire that's already going, or optimizing it or creating an extension of it. I think, again, Alex Hermosi said, people don't want a new thing. They want a better, faster version of the thing you're already doing really well. How do you think about when people come to you and say like, "Hey, I need to increase sales, so I'm going to launch a whole new tea line. But we don't do tea yet, but I'm going to do a whole new tea line."
Mhm.
How do you think? How do you conceptualize that when you think about helping them consider what to do next?
Well, I'm just going to anger our listeners at home.
Well, good. Let's get that out of the way.
Yeah. If you're not solving a problem, you're not doing it right. So the question is what problem are you solving, right? And if that line of your business is going well, it means you're solving a problem.
I love
So
it.
you can find more people who have that same problem that you're solving. But for like, let's just look at this as I'm going to try not to use this example too much. But you already broke the ice on the pandemic, so let's talk pandemic, right? the when you think of things like, oh well, I'm just got another product to our mix. Like when everybody is at home and nobody's leaving their house, adding another product to your product mix is not going to get you more sales, right? It's going to cost you something because it's going to cost you the ingredients to get that started. Because you didn't stop to think about what problem is actually being solved here. The problem is that people can't be outside right now,
Right.
depending on where you're at. Your guests are not allowed to do that, or they're concerned and scared and not wanting to leave their house, those sorts of things. So then the question becomes, well, what problem do they have, and can you solve that creatively, right?
Yeah.
People still like coffee. People still want to wake up. Coffee is fundamentally a service in that way. So figure out how to get it to them that way.
Yeah.
If you're a roastery, that option is obvious. You just sell more roasted coffee because people can make that at home. And every roaster I know, they saw their home like direct to consumer sales go up a ton because people were buying more coffee to stay home. But as a coffee shop only, which is the type of business that I ran, I had to get a little more creative, right? I had to like make half-gallon lattes and do a delivery service where I would deliver service to people and figure out like I had to start route planning, and I learned that you can only have 10 locations in one Google trip. So I would have to like lock down extra locations so that I could effectively plan. And so I had to learn how to like route people by zip codes and those sorts of things and like strategize how I was delivering things to people, but it was because I was thinking about problem solving. And it's like, how am I going to solve your problem? Well, so in the example of, well, it's easier to pour gasoline on a fire that's already going versus make a new one. Sometimes products are a gamble of figuring out if you're actually going to solve a problem with that product, right? Like fundamentally, that's what we're doing, right? Like we're saying, hey, I think you probably have a problem as a business owner that, you're struggling and this has been really tight. And so we're going to offer you a service to help you consider how you're running your business and try to help you come up with some good solutions. And if you like it enough and it's delivering enough value, you're going to give us money and it'll provide for our families and we can like keep on keeping on,
Yeah.
And so like in a lot of ways you throw something out, see if it's working, because that's a way of determining what problems there are. Hopefully you have a better idea than not ahead of time, but and if it's not working, then no big deal. But if you know that it is working and you just need to find more people who have the same problem, pouring gasoline on it just helps you find more people that have that same problem, because your product already solves that problem, right? So that's what I think about it. Is that yes, it is generally easier to do that because you already know that it's solving a problem. So you're just finding more people to solve that problem for.
Yeah. I like that. That's a really good explanation of why that works. Is this not just the analogy of pouring gasoline on a fire that's already burning? The reason it's burning well in the first place is because it obviously solves a problem and fills a need. And I think that's a really helpful reason why. Well, over the course of the upcoming episodes, we'll be diving into each kind of part of the airplane more in depth. It'll just naturally come up with conversations about how to decide what problem you solve, how to create a mission or a vision or some core values that are actually exciting and compelling to people, i.e. how to build a plane people actually want to get on. It'll naturally come up as we dive deeper and deeper. Because I have so many questions for you, especially Maxwell, about like marketing tactics and or market research. Like, how do you figure out what the needs are? How do you be a little bit more certain about those things? Those kind of questions are ones that come up all the time. For today's episode, though, the hope is just to keep it a little bit more high level in terms of giving you this analogy or this mental model for how a healthy business can take great care of people. And I think in the same way that an airplane takes great care of the people who are on board it, a healthy coffee business takes great care of people. And we would never say, this particular airline, they do a great job, but they always force like 5 of the passengers to go sit on the wings for the duration of the flight. Like, that would be totally unacceptable, because that's not taking great care of people. This assumption that somebody has to get the short end of the stick is one that I strongly challenge. And I think building a healthy business that takes great care of everybody in it is very much like building an airplane that's airworthy. The cockpit is like the leadership, and the right engine's like the marketing and messaging. The left engine's like the sales. Products are the wings. The body's where the people sit. That's your overhead, your labor, all that stuff. And the fuel tanks are the cash flow. They're not the point, but you need them full of fuel to get where you're going. Otherwise, if you run out of cash, your business will crash. I hope that was helpful for those of you listening. We're going to continue to dive into what it takes to build a healthy coffee business that takes great care of people. Appreciate you being here with us today. And until next time, take care. Thank you for joining me today for my discussion with Maxwell Mooney. Please check out the links in the show note captions to follow Maxwell Mooney on Instagram at Maxwell Threadbare. You can also check out the interview he did with Upflip that has millions of views. They interviewed him while he still owned Narrative. If you're enjoying this podcast, please consider subscribing on YouTube. That's a great zero-cost way to support this podcast. In addition, please subscribe to the podcast on Apple and Spotify. And on both Spotify and Apple, you can leave us up to a 5-star review. Please check out our online courses, our group coaching, and our one-on-one coaching. That's the absolute best way to support this podcast. If you have any questions or topics you'd like us to cover or guests you'd like us to invite, please leave those in the comments section on YouTube. If you're not already following us on social media, we are at Threadbare Coffee Consulting on Instagram, and that's really the only platform we're active on. That's where I regularly post bite-sized thoughts on what it will take you, the owner, to build a healthy coffee business that takes great care of people, including you. The content we post on Instagram overlaps with the podcast, but it's generally distinct from anything we cover on this podcast. If you haven't already visited our website, we have a myriad of free tools and trainings for coffee shop and coffee roastery owners. Everything from calculating your cost of goods sold for both a cafe and a roastery, which is completely different, pricing, which again for a cafe and roastery is completely different, managing labor percentage in a way that takes great care of people, etc., etc. All of those tools and trainings are available at our website, threadbarecoffeeconsulting.com. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode. And last but not least, thank you for your interest in building a healthy coffee business that takes great care of people, including you.